Blake, what's the most money you've ever lost in an illegal underground card game?
What happens in Shanghai stays in Shanghai, but it was 10 grand.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech director out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, the only person at Church Gear who has helped Drew move into his house. And I'm here with Toby, who didn't show up to help Drew move into his house, my boss, Toby Walters.
I was told that Drew had already moved into his house by the time I was done with his meeting.
That's the fun thing. It was me, Drew, and his dad was a beast, and we got everything up in that house.
His dad grew up a tobacco farmer in North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, his dad used to just throw 2 bushels of tobacco on each shoulder while smoking a bushel. So, I mean, he's 3 bushels up. And
apparently all you do is go to Shanghai with Charles Barkley. I mean, I've never heard of anybody losing 10 grand in a card game except for Charles Barkley.
Well, and that was his first bet. So then I lost all of my money on my first bet just calling him. It was not great.
You were just looking at Barkley. You're like, whatever he does, I'll do.
I was, and I was like, you're going to front me, right? And then he didn't.
Yeah.
So.
And are you going to run for governor of Alabama?
Oh, no, I'll run for mayor of Coleman, but not governor of Alabama.
Well, I was going to think, what if they put like what's the headquarters?
Oh.
Where does the governor live?
The Capitol?
The Capitol, that's what it's called.
Yeah, if they put the Capitol in Coleman.
If they put Alabama headquarters in Coleman.
You know, Alabama's so trash, you don't get to call it headquarters. It's
all our friends in Alabama are going to, it's real close to Tennessee. They can just come up here and slap you.
Well, and what's funny about it is I only trash it because of a friend who doesn't even listen to this podcast. So
okay, let's trash a whole different area of the country.
Okay.
So
as long as it's not Nashville or Seattle, that's where most of our listeners come from.
Seattle?
It shocked me too.
What?
I know.
Man, we got to go to Seattle in the summer.
That's how far? Yes.
Okay, so I grew up in San Diego. So let's have a little fun with San Diego. Obviously, I had some experiences growing up.
I don't know what that means.
So, did you go on field trips in high school?
Oh, yeah. Those were the best.
Okay.
Wait, not high school.
Yeah.
We did it in elementary school.
I did too, but we at least had one, I remember, in high school.
Look, Toby, this is a Tennessee education, all right? I'm just lucky I can spell.
So high school senior year government, U.S. government, speaking of the headquarters of Alabama, U.S. government, and we did a field trip to downtown San Diego to observe a court, but a case?
A court case?
A court case?
Can people tell it's 8 o'clock for Toby?
It's early. I'm on my second cup of coffee. But so we went to downtown San Diego to observe court cases for our government class.
Was it awkward because one of your family members was in the case?
That was a nice try. Swing and a miss. So, you take a bunch of 17-year-old boys and girls and put them in downtown San Diego and say, go observe a court case and write a 1-page thing about it. What do you think's going through our head?
You're going to skip the case and ad-lib the paper and then just have a good time downtown.
Well, I was a little better student than that, so I was thinking, I bet I can get this done in 15 minutes and then go goof off downtown.
Okay.
So me and my buddy Nathan, that was exactly what we were going to do, and we did that. We found a court case. We sat in. We observed for 15 minutes. We wrote down a page of observations.
What was the case about?
I don't know.
It wasn't like a murder trial or something?
No. I'm sure it was something
Traffic
wildly
court.
boring.
Okay.
And all my dreams of being a defense lawyer went out the window.
Oh, I would be such a good lawyer. Okay.
So we thought, well, let's go explore downtown. And as a 17-year-old boy, where do you think the first place I wanted to explore in downtown San Diego was?
Well, Toby, this is a Christian podcast, so I'm going to say the beach.
It was Wendy's.
Oh, my gosh. Wendy's is the restaurant, right? Not Wendy's house.
Correct.
Okay.
So in my wildest 17-year-old, mom's not here to tell me I can't do this, let's go to Wendy's.
Toby had a boring childhood, guys. A really boring one.
It's downtown San Diego. So
you didn't go to a taco shop? Your love of tacos hadn't started yet,
No, it really hadn't.
Okay.
Yeah. My level of acceptance of food was much lower back then.
Do you ever mourn the opportunities you missed in San Diego? I mean, you had years of tacos you missed out on.
Well, I go back twice a year, so
That's true. It's good to be the boss.
Yeah. So we go to Wendy's in downtown San Diego, and we're waiting in line, and a gentleman who what's the politically correct term for homeless?
I guess unhoused.
Unhoused. So an unhoused gentleman came up to us, 17-year-old boys, and said, "Would you like to see something interesting?"
Oh my gosh.
And I'm
I don't think
thinking-
I've heard this.
I'm 17. I'm like, well, of course I'd like to see something interesting.
I just got here to the world.
I know. I'm from the suburbs. And I've never been downtown without my parents, so I'd love to see something interesting.
So I went to Wendy's.
So he says, "Come over to the table here." And so,
So you're in the Wendy's for this
in the
story.
Wendy's,
Okay.
yes. So we're thinking, we're in Wendy's. We're safe. It's not dangerous. So we go over and we sit down at the table with this gentleman, and he says, "I want to show you a trick." And he pulls out 3 cards and puts the 3 cards on the table face down. And he picks up one and he shows us in the Queen of Hearts. And he said, "Here's the Queen of Hearts." And he puts it right down in the middle and he starts shuffling the cards. And, as an adult, I understand this is called 3-card Monty. Are you familiar with this
okay.
game?
I don't think I've ever played it. I think
So
I've seen it in movies.
It's like a sleight of hand thing that, people that are good at it can do, and they move the card around, and you're trying, as the observer, you want to guess where the card is. So he put the Queen of Hearts face down, and he started shuffling the cards. And then he looked up and he said, "Do you know where the Queen of Hearts is?" And I knew exactly where it was. So I pointed at the card, flipped it over. He's like, "Oh, man." He's like, "You were good. You got it." And I'm thinking, I am great.
Uh-oh. Hustle. It's a hustle, baby.
So he says, "You want to see if," he says, "Do you have $1?" And I didn't think anything wrong with the question. I was like, "Oh yeah, I've got $1."
Yeah, back in the prehistoric days, Toby did carry cash,
And he said, "Show me the $1." And so I pulled out $1, and he's like, "Man, okay." He's like, follow the cards. So he did it again.
He didn't even say, we're going to bet this $1.
I don't know. I was
Okay.
very caught up in the moment. I was very excited about being downtown
At
at
se-
Wendy's
at seven-
without my parents at 17, okay? Give me a break.
Toby, your childhood, my goodness.
So he shuffles the cards again. He moves them around. He says, "Where's the Queen of Hearts?" And I knew where it was again. I pointed it out. He flipped it over. He's like, "Oh, man, you're so good at this." And I'm like, "Yes, I am." So he says, "You don't have $5, do you?" And I'm like, "I do." So I pulled out $5. He's like, "Man, you're going to take me for a ride." So he does it again. And he says, "Where's the Queen of Hearts?" And I still knew where it was. And I pointed to the card. And he flipped it over. He's like, "Oh, man, you are so good." He's like, "I don't think I've ever had someone so good at this game." And I'm like, "I know."
So then did he give you $5?
So
At that
he
point-
says, you want to go one more time?" He says, "You don't have $20, do you?" And I'm like, "I do."
Why do you have $26?
I had $20. It was like I had $1, I had $5. I had a collection of bills that added up to $20.
Toby's money collection.
And what it was is my mom had given me $20 so I could get lunch, and also I could get milk on the way home.
So you could get milk on the way home.
Yep, we needed milk that day. So I pull out my $20. He's like, "Man, I did not think you'd have $20. And so he rifles through his pockets, comes out with $20. He's like, "All right, here we go." He's like, "You're pretty good." So he starts shuffling the cards, and he says, "Okay, where's the Queen of Hearts?" And Blake, I tell you, I knew where that Queen of Hearts was, and I pointed it out, and he said, "Nope," grabbed my $20 and ran out the door.
He didn't even show you?
No.
He didn't even, you knew where it was.
And so I, obviously I wet myself, and then I went after him. And so I started chasing this homeless man down the street. I swear to God, this is a true story, 100% true. And as I'm chasing him, my glasses slip off my face, fall on the ground, and my lens pops out.
No. This is awful.
This is my life in a nutshell, Blake.
This is why I have to keep you from getting murdered.
Obviously. And so I catch up with the homeless man, and I'm like, "Sir, please, that is money that my mom gave me for lunch and milk later." He's like, "Sorry, you lose, you lose."
There wasn't even a loss. He didn't show the card. It was just
No.
theft.
I know.
This is hysterical. And
So-
if he's running that game in Wendy's, I feel like they would have kicked him out by now.
I know.
Well, speaking of people that'll take your money,
In San Diego.
in San Diego, I'm here to introduce a traveling production master, owner of Crew Brew Coffee, Gene Kim. Gene, welcome to the show, man.
My all the stories you could have used to tee me up, that was incredible. So I feel like there's a lot of stakes to not let you guys down.
And Gene, did you live in San Diego in 1997?
I sure did. I've been here for a while.
Were you hustling in Wendy's in downtown San
Toby
Diego?
was at a court case, so we're putting you on trial for this case.
Yeah, it's not the first time someone has thought that I was homeless, particularly my wife's family. So,
I thought you were going to say particularly your wife.
Yeah.
Oh, the in-laws.
Well, thanks for having me guys on.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate it.
So we had your buddy Dennis Choi, and then I, just a couple of weeks ago, I was up at Saddleback hanging out with Dennis, and he had just had coffee with you that morning, and he's like, you got to have Gene Kim on the podcast. He says, do you know who Gene Kim is? And I said, yes, he's the guy that I'm currently waiting on my pending friend request on Facebook.
Wow. Just out me.
I know.
You're like, well, this guy just leave me hanging out there.
So I'm hoping
dangling.
the podcast will seal the deal.
I feel like you've got a good shot.
So Dennis is actually our third. I mean, he just released 2 weeks ago. Well, I guess now this time that this is coming out, longer than that. But he's already our third most played episode, so we had to take his recommendation seriously.
Wow.
And Gene, we planned these out months in advance. So you jumping in at the last second, really, you're my hero. So thank you.
Well, I hope I can live up to his expectations. They're pretty high, so I'll do my best.
And he has set the bar as far as, third most listened to. So you got to see if you can best Dennis Choi.
Oh, if you bested him, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. Who was first? Was it Lee?
Right now,
I'm hoping it's Lee.
Right now, it's Lee and Quentin are battling for first. They come within.
Oh, Q.
Yeah,
Well, Q's got a great story. I didn't listen to the podcast, but knowing that he almost died on a show, that's pretty compelling stuff. I don't think I have anything as interesting, but
I literally
two epic dudes. So
when I was writing his episode title, I thought, is it crazy to say murder attempt by speakers? And I was like, yes, it is, and yes, I'm going to do it. So. Okay, so but hey, enough about other people's episodes. Let's have the Gene Kim episode. Let's introduce him with his 5 truths and a lie. So I'm going to read them out. I'm going to try not to mispronounce them because that's a pet peeve of Toby's, and then we will guess. Here we go.
All right.
I've illegally shot a coyote with a bow. I don't know why that would be illegal.
I know. I figure you just shoot coyotes.
No one
Everybody's
likes coyotes.
Thank you.
I feel like even PETA doesn't like coyotes.
And there's a lot of coyotes in San Diego.
Well, and coyotes are scary. Real story. So I'm in my new house, 2020. It's the second month of the pandemic, and I wake up to society crumbling. I mean, there is yelling in the streets. I look outside looking for pitchforks, and I'm freaking out. And my country wife, who's from middle of nowhere, West Tennessee, she goes, Blake, it's just coyotes. Go back to sleep.
Did she shoot them with a bow?
She didn't. She's not as cool as Gene, but it scared the crap out of me.
Assuming this is true. Okay.
Yeah. Number 2. Oh, okay. Number 2. The Nashville Sounds are my favorite professional sports team, and I've only been to one game. This cannot be true. Why would he's in San Diego?
Yeah, but a lot of touring happens out of Nashville, so I'm sure he spent a lot of time in Nashville.
It's really early in the day to give you your compliment, but that's a really good deduction.
And there is no minor league baseball team in San Diego.
Number 3, I have bought and sold an API 2500 4 times.
I would tend to believe that as like a former gear addict. I would have done something like that.
That's so funny, too, because my best friend Jeremy just sold, his church has sold gear to us like 3 times, or maybe 4, and he just bought back one of the things he sold us like a year ago. All right, number 4, I never change a truck pack.
What is a truck pack?
Toby, I was going to ask you that, man.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's a musical thing. Gene, what is a truck pack?
When you have a semi-truck and you've got an order of gear at the end of the day that goes in it.
Oh.
It's called a truck pack.
Well, we have changed truck packs. Like when we're on the road and we go to another church and then we have to shuffle all the gear. Like it's packing the truck pack.
Right.
I see.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm actually supremely versed in this.
Yes.
Number 5, I lived in Italy for 3 months and came home broke. So he was hustling people for money at Wendy's in Italy at the end of that 3 months.
Didn't have the skills that your friend at Wendy's had.
Your friend at Wendy's. Number 6, I have a small 10-pound dog that I like more than my children.
Oh, man.
That is going to be true. I'm not considering that as a lie. Not even for a second.
Okay. I like these.
These are really good. I have questions on all of them. I would have gone with number 2, but your deduction was so good that I'm not. And I am going to say it's the API 2500 because he only did it 2 times instead of 4.
Okay. I assume if it is the API 2500 that he actually did it 5 times because that makes the story even more interesting. But I'm going to say that he illegally shot a coyote with a bow. I feel like that one stands out to me as there's something different about that.
That also takes a lot of skill, and I now have a lot of regrets that I didn't copy you, which is, most of my time in life.
Yeah.
And I notice he did not put on there swindled a 17-year-old boy out of $20 with 3-card Monte because now we know that's true.
Well, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Gene, we're locking in. I've got the API. Toby's got the coyote. What is it?
Those are both true stories.
What? What's the lie?
I don't change the truck pack. And if you ask anyone that's worked with me, they know that I'm just a tinker. And so I just lay in my bus bunk thinking about how to get 2 more feet off the truck tail. And it drives them crazy because at the end of the show, they're just like, there he goes. I'll napkin cat it out and I'll tape it to the side door and we'll try to get it better. But they hate it. It's like a running joke all tour. That's what I do.
Have you ever thought about working for Church Gear?
I was just about to say that, Toby.
So our tech director, Brian, he will think about these things ahead of time and he will look and we'll be going to, up to a dozen churches sometimes on some of these runs. And so our driver has to figure out, okay, what if I put everything in the back of the truck and then on the last church I have like 8 dual 18 subs and then I have to move everything around. So yeah, there is somebody intelligent thinking about these things, but we could use more.
Well, it's the ultimate game of Tetris.
How did you feel on the API? I mean, by that 4th time, like fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you, for me.
Yeah, I do a couple weird things. One, I change consoles every tour because I just think that's really dumb and I should do it. So different console every tour.
That's Blake's motto
like
for
continuity.
life.
Toby, we're too close. That was what I was going to say.
Yeah. And then I'll go back and forth. So right now, it's like all outboard gear, no waves. And then, I'm sure in 2 years, some magical unicorn plugin will come out and I'll have to have it and I'll flip to all in the box. And then I'll decide I don't like the points of failure and I'll go back and I'll do all outboard gear again. And it's just a vicious cycle. But that piece of gear in particular is one that I love. And so it's like a real problem for me. I just can't seem to stay away from it.
Where did you buy and sell it 4 times? Were you on like every different platform or you were always like on Craigslist?
I mean, Reverb, eBay, Alto, Sonic Circus. I mean, if you want to talk about gear, I can show you how much of a degenerate I am. It's quite embarrassing, actually.
Well, next time you need to buy all your outboard gear, you can go to churchgear.com. Okay, so the Nashville Sounds, was Toby's logic correct? Was it because you tour here often that's your team?
Yeah. This last run of shows, maybe in like April, I think we were there and I went to a game and I don't think I like baseball. I mean, I don't really follow sports, but I like going to baseball games and actually any game's pretty good, but I pretty much had the most fun I've ever had at a baseball game. And I literally thought I should buy season tickets. Our tour manager was saying they're only like $400 something bucks. So I was like, I'm in Nashville a lot, so I think it'd be worth it. But $3 beers, $20 for a seat, sometimes less, and you're like right there on the rail. So it's amazing. And you can tell like the pressure of AAA to pro, like trying to make that jump. And so there isn't this like feeling of an athlete where like they're paid millions of dollars. Like when these guys like strike out or make an error, like you can feel the weight of that, like, oh man, I'm not going to make it to the bigs feeling. And then like also the pictures aren't as good, it's still AAA. So like when you see someone get shelled, it's really entertaining. So I had a blast. That's why I like. And then I bought a hat,
Oh, you got to have the merch.
That's my favorite team now. That's it. The Sounds.
There is something like magical about minor league baseball because, Gene, growing up in San Diego, we had the Padres, and that's fine. And Petco Park is great. But when I moved to Austin and we had the Round Rock Express, and I went to a game, it's such a different experience. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
So how old were you in Italy when you went broke in 3 months?
Yeah, we were newlyweds. I just got married, and we had not by our choice, but we had a gigantic wedding, and it was like 500 plus people.
Whoa.
And so, relatives are generous, and we just took all that money and we're like, let's go live in Italy for a little while and let's see how long this can last. And so we went there and just got fat. We just ate our way through. We lived in Florence for most of it, but we're living high on the hog, so to speak. So it was fun, but we came home with nothing, and we still don't regret it. We still think it's the best thing we've ever done.
And did you have to sell your API just to get the tickets back home?
No, I didn't know about cool stuff like API 2500s back then.
Well, Gene,
I wish I did.
As the Gen Z would say, I'll get my money back, but I'll never get that 3 months in Italy. That's awesome.
You're not Gen Z.
No.
I'm like 3 years away from it, and I see the tiki-talks, so I know the lingo.
The tiki-talks?
The talk ticks.
Is that tic-tac?
I don't like that you've beat me to what I was going to say 3 times. Okay, so Gene, give us some of your background. How'd you get started in tech? What are some of your favorite artists you've gotten to work with?
Yeah, I was working. I have a mentor, and he was a studio session drummer guy, and so he kind of gave me the talk. He's like, if you're going to be in this industry in San Diego, it's not a really big music, city. You're going to have like 5 jobs, and some of that's install, some of that's live sound, some of that's doing like comping vocals and doing overdub sessions at 2 a.m. Like you're just going to have to figure stuff out. And so that's how I kind of like got my first job. I was at a church called North Coast Calvary Chapel, and they were moving buildings, and they said, hey, we could use some help. And then I ended up working there for a little while. And then I worked at a church called The Rock. I got hired as an assistant, like an A2. And then, gosh, that was like a whirlwind of six years or something like that. And I saw the church just explode, one campus, to 5 campuses. And that's where I got like a lot of church ministry experience, But when I decided to kind of move on from there, I was doing a show at a church, like a Christmas show, and Phil Wickham was there with the Shanes, and a friend of mine was like, hey, we need someone to run monitors, and so I went there to do that, and Phil's tour manager attended The Rock, and so he used to be the guy that would like text me, be like, hey, like your lobby speakers are out of time, or he would just heckle me during services. And he's like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm just freelancing. And he's like, not anymore. And so he just booked out the rest of the year, and I started touring. So that was kind of how it happened. And
what campus were you at on The Rock, like the iteration of The Rock?
Yeah, I was at the Point Loma campus. And at that time, we had like several campuses. And so I was kind of like just the beginnings of kind of like making a central team and kind of like having like a resource as they launched these, campuses. But, like any church growing, it's just a hot mess, and it's just kind of chaos. But at the same time, like, there's there's a lot of fun memories in chaos.
So
You know?
you were there after they had moved to Liberty Station and got the main campus set up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like 1 year after they moved, that's when I got hired. And that summer we had Hillsong, Tomlin, Third Day, Toby Mac, Israel, Hooten, and like all in one summer concert series. And 3 months in, they fired my boss. And I just like hung on, like I didn't know how to host a tour and all that stuff. And I just cobbled it together, and a bunch of touring professionals were very gracious and kind. And then that's how I got I just kind of worked my way up,
So apparently I opened for all these major artists, Blake, because I led worship at the Rock like
There you
3
go.
or 4 years before Gene is talking about. So
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
laid the groundwork for guys like
Yeah.
Toby Mac. I mean, I am the OG Toby.
Toby coming in and taking credit for stuff he didn't do since day one. So were you freelancing that whole time at the church, or were you employed there?
I was employed there, yeah, full time on staff.
How many years were you there before you started touring?
6. 6 years.
Okay. So you're at the church for that time, then you go on the road. So who are you on the road with first? Because I'm assuming you're not on the road, as the production manager for Johnny Swim. Like, that's pretty dope. Like, that had to be a couple steps later.
I was with Phil Wickham since about 2015 up until like 18, and then that's when I hopped on with Johnny Swim. But you kind of never stop working for people you love, and Phil's definitely one of those people. It's just been fortunate to kind of do hundreds of shows with that guy, especially during the pandemic when churches were kind of the only spaces having shows. So yeah, just hopping in. I can't tell you how much I like that guy.
And as you know, San
it works
Diego,
out.
as you've mentioned, is, it's kind of a small music town in the sense there's not a whole lot going on.
Right.
So I don't know, I think it was 2002. I can't remember if I've told the story before, but I was leading worship at College Avenue Baptist for their college service.
That's where I got married.
Oh.
Dude, that's where I got married, man. College Ave.
So we, honestly, I think we were moving over to the Rock to do some services. And so we said to the college pastor at College Ave, we're going to have to step back because we're taking on this other thing. And I said, do you have somebody else, in mind to step in? And he said, well, there's this guy, Phil Wickham. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, never heard of him. Cool. And then come to find out that he is like one of the greatest, Christian artists of all time now. Like, real fine.
Well, Toby, I want to go back to something Gene said. He said, you never stop working for people you love. So I think you are stuck with me for a really long time.
No, I was just going to say, like, Phil Wickham went his way, and I now have Blake.
Yes, you won out, man.
Yeah,
you won out.
You came up on that. Yeah.
Phil doesn't have a Blake, though.
So Gene, tell us, you're out on the road for all these years, and one of our favorite things to ask, and we haven't got to do it in a little bit, is a disaster story. So, like, this is when everything went wrong. Like, now these can also, as a caveat, this could be like, you might have fixed it. So, like, maybe you saw something was going to go wrong and it was massive. Like, we had one guy who sprinted through a church and sprinted up, the gaffing is what that's called? No.
Yeah.
The catwalk?
The catwalk. They sprinted. Where did the gaffing come from?
Gaff is tape. Gaff tape.
He was taping this together. But anyways, so he averted the disaster. But like, even better if it was a disaster. So do you have any disaster stories from your time out on the road or at church?
Oh, I've got so many, and I could just think of a lot of your time. But one with Phil, we were doing a festival out in Washington, and we were doing some weird routing, and we were flying through Denver, and half our guitars didn't show up. Like when you gate check something, and then like they're like, yeah, it'll be, at the gate when you get off, because they're just going to put it at the front of the, luggage or whatnot, bring it up as you exit the plane. And none of our guitars came out. So they're like, it's going to be in baggage claim. So everyone goes, gets on the next flight to Washington, and we go to baggage claim and their guitars aren't there. And then they say, like, for some reason they're in San Francisco. So now, like through the night, we're flying through San Francisco. We get to a hotel. We get in at like 4. We sleep for 30 minutes. We get on the next flight to Washington. Then we drive to, where we're headed. So we've been up for, forever. Like we're zombies, like falling asleep at the gate and all that stuff. And we get, I get to the venue about 45 minutes from doors, and the band's like, hey, we got a sound check. And I'm doing monitors, and there's this old 5D, depending on how far you are out in the, in the middle of America, like the further you are from a major city, the more relics you're going to see. And so I actually like the 5D. It feels like if I see like a profile or an SE48 or a 5D, I get this like strange, warm, fuzzy feeling. It's almost like how like an old guy looks at an analog console. But anyway, so I put in my little, that PCM like compact flash cart harness thing. And I start roughing it in, and band's starting to go, and then we just lose power. So imagine like the desk just shuts down, like full bye-bye. Fire it up, it's 0. There's nothing on it. And the band's just like, what happened? And I was just, I was up for how long, and I just kind of slumped over the desk. I couldn't even really cry or make sounds, and God bless those guys. They just looked at me. I was like, I don't know what happened, but the console's just wiped. Like, I don't know what happened. And then they're like, all right, guys, we're just gonna give Gene a few minutes. And I was like, you mean a few minutes to doors? Cool. And when you have like a great band, they're just like, he'll figure it out. And so but I needed a good like 5 minutes. I didn't even yell at anyone. I was just so tired. I felt like, well, this is how I get fired, or this is my last show. I can't do this anymore. And then show starts, and I just start from the beginning, kick, Phil's vocal, click, his guitar for everyone. And you just kind of like spread it around and figure it out. And they just, they like fully know that they probably got like 1 or 2 things in their ear, and they're just so good. It just doesn't matter.
So the power came back on?
Yeah. And it just like, like when power's kind of iffy and like the screen's not as bright and like the encoder, like just, I don't know if it was the desk or the power or both, but it was just like, I felt like I was just like, at any moment, this thing could just take a dump. But
that's what Toby says anytime he looks at his dog.
That is true. So there seems to be this nostalgia, this like, I mean, there are old guys. We have, he's not old, but one of our techs, Boggs, like if you give him a 5D, you just see his face light up. We just got a couple 1Ds from First Baptist Atlanta, and he's looking at these things. Oh my gosh, some 1Ds, they're so pretty. So is for you, is it exciting to go back in time with gear, so to speak, like a nostalgia, or are you more like, give me the new stuff, or does it just depend on the flavor of the day?
Man, that's a good question. So there's kind of 2 things. I like some of the old stuff, like particularly the Yamahas or the profiles, because the patching was so straightforward. It was just a grid, and the way you could do, especially in monitors, but just the way you could like all your pans and sends were all on that left top corner, and you could just do it so quickly. Nowadays, the reason I'm picking gear is because, I think you kind of forget, like, nobody I work for cares what console. That's like 2 tours ago, I was like, hey, like, Abner, I'm thinking about taking out one of these, and it was like a Heritage 3K. Like, I was like, I'm going to take out like, and he was just like, okay, like, I don't even know what that is, but if that's what you want to take out, go ahead. And I was like, well, the only problem is it's going to take like 5 or 6 dudes to tip it every night, and it could be a problem.
Yeah, it only weighs like 400 pounds.
Yeah, it's, and I've got to carry like 3 or 4 power supplies just to make sure it works every day. And then there's going to be that ginormous copper snake that you're going to huff out of the case every night. But otherwise, it's going to be awesome,
Yeah, we actually
But
had a production company come up and pick up some projectors from us, and then they saw that we had a profile and said, "Oh man,
Yeah.
this is great because we are doing Michael Bolton coming up, and he has to have a profile."
Yeah, I mean, it's home. I mean, it has a certain sound, but the reason I like gear is, I'm really just trying to like balance reliability, on the road, and then also to like keep things interesting. And so when you change consoles, at least for me, I typically will do it on a new album cycle, and that way all the new songs, all the new elements, whatever they've done artistically, I don't have like a comfortable like path to send it, like, oh, that sound or that thing is familiar, let me put it down the same signal path as I've treated other stuff. It makes me go, okay, what would be cool to do with that? And then since I have this like console I'm not like super familiar with, like it forces me to find a way to kind of represent that well. And so that's why I'm just constantly moving from one manufacturer to another.
And Dennis Choi said that you almost have like an obsession or a badge of honor to say, hey, I don't need, a Digico 338. I can do it with a Midas Heritage. And he claims that you said, I want to go on a major tour with an X32 at front of house just to prove I can do it.
I really do. I want to do something with like a TF or maybe less than even. I mean, like if you think about it, like the joke is, I think it's hilarious that we're like, wow, what an engineer you are to do a show on a Heritage 3K, because, like growing up, that was like Everest. Like if I ever even put a hand on that thing, like I would see the engineers and just be like, wow, that is like a spaceship. And I don't know if there's anything that sounds better, but an X32, you're like, if you had told someone in the 80s, like this little console's this big and it does what 4 outboard racks and that giant console can do, I think you'd be pretty pumped, So it's kind of like, I think you have to, if you want to do something cool, you've got to have like a Mackie VLZ, like a 1604 or something like that.
So who is the lucky artist?
To be proud of.
Who's the lucky artist that is going to get this Mackie VLZ?
Yeah, I could do it with Johnny Swim. I'm pretty sure. Phil solo, like I've definitely done like acoustic shows on, like the Allen and Heath GL something 2400. Like I've definitely done shows on. Oh man, I have like the last show of a tour. Our bus got stuck in Reno, and he wakes me up and he says, "Hey, we couldn't get over to San Jose because of snow and ice. We have to fly to Vegas and then over to San Jose." And so band, we literally like grabbed his guitar out of the trailer. I'm like crawling back there, like looking for a tuner. I throw like 50 CDs into my luggage, dump out all my clothes, and we get to, San Jose, and there's this like old analog console with 16 channels on it, and I've got to do openers and him acoustic on it, and it doesn't matter for some artists. Like they're just so good. Like, and Johnny Swim's the same way. They, some Behringer analog thing with 6 channels and half of them are pots instead of faders. Like it wouldn't matter. It really wouldn't.
So that kind of scenario is what a lot of church techs feel like, honestly, every Sunday is for them, is making it happen. Caleb Lepke's phrase, making it crappin', with nothing.
Yeah.
So how would you encourage church techs that don't have huge budgets to be like, hey, you can make it happen, like with the things you can fit in a suitcase in your scenario?
Yeah. I don't think I've met so many engineers who are like so loved and appreciated by their worship team or senior pastor or whoever. And they're really just mediocre engineers, but like the intent they have of wanting it to be great for their team and, you know, going above and beyond trying to prepare and make sure lines are good. And, you know, like what I'm saying is there's just a lot of less than what we would call ideal, like things you wouldn't see on social, like with just like lines that don't work and whatever, just less than gear. And I think if the metric is kind of like that team sense of like, hey, we did it, like we're doing our best, we're trying to serve our congregation. Like I've met a lot of like just like average, you know, not super competent engineers who are just absolutely adored, and congregations that have amazing worship in, you know, school gyms. And, you know, it just, I don't know. I think the metric has to be people, not like your own preference or what you think it should be or could be. I think that somehow like skews perspective in a way that just isn't really helpful for anybody. You know?
So it seems like you have this encouragement or almost this like hoorah for techs that can make it happen regardless of their circumstances. They're doing great things because they have the attitude of, it's not necessarily the gear, I'm going to make it happen regardless. What would you say to churches on the other end that have huge budgets and they have plenty of money to spend on production and they are buying API 2500s 4 times just because they can afford it? How do you kind of, challenge and encourage them to maybe not necessarily or think more critically about what you're spending your money on rather than just having, big eyes and buying the flashy new thing?
Yeah, again, I think it's easy to kind of like run through like the haves and have-nots through like your own personal sense of what you think should be in the church or shouldn't. And at the end of the day, like having worked for 2 churches that have huge budgets and ones that don't have huge budgets, I think like what we forget as like the tech people is these leadership teams are really just trying to, reach their community and kind of like figure out what type, like who in the, big C church they are. And if the role is to like, what we would have called like seeker 10 years ago, or just to be like, provide a better experience and reach more people and do it that way in a format that people are familiar with in terms of like production level, like that's one way. If the other one is like, hey, like it's going to be more low tech and it's going to be like this, it's because they want to reach people that feel like church should look a certain way. And so, the problem runs when the engineers look at the stuff as being like the bear, like the key, like, like it's like if we just had X and then we could do. And a lot of times having any sort of gear is more about fulfilling like a personal like desire, not like something that the church needs. And again, I'm saying this fully aware, knowing like I totally do this. Like no artist is like, well, you really need that 2500 Gene if you want to work for me. That is completely selfish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for in the church context, it's kind of like, like you really have to think about, what does your leadership want from you, and what is their like version of success, like, and how does that support like what the church views as success? And it's like production infrastructure and gear part of that question. If it is, then like, do it. But we get it weird when it's like we think we need this to do something, or like that piece of gear or system somehow like represents who we are and our like ability level and like our sense of proficiency and value. That's when it just gets really sideways, you know? And so
I almost feel
that's
like
what I would say.
the gear can be a liability sometimes if it's kind of like kids that grow up rich and they just assume that this is how everybody lives. And so, the greatest recording engineers of all time don't necessarily
Yeah.
start on SSL boards. They start in their bedroom with
No.
a 4-track Tascam and they learn the fundamentals before, and, they move up the ladder of the gear. And then they realize, as you have experienced, I don't need this whatever to make this happen. It's helpful, but it's because of, where I started and all the steps I took to get there that now I can use this
Right.
properly.
Sure.
So go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, and also like people will ask an engineer, hey, how do you get certain sounds, and how do you get, and I also think, to be fair, like I think like, quote unquote, like the more people you work with, like I don't think I can take credit for how things sound as much as like the source. You know what I mean? And so I kind of harp on that quite a bit. And in the same way, like Phil, you just push the fader up and there it is. Like it's just what it sounds like. Like he just happens to have a strangely, like a one of a kind acoustic guitar that sounds gigantic. Like it just does. And so I think like, the what you evaluate your success as should just be like, especially in the church, like it should just be like, what kind of environment did we create for people, and did we make it the best we possibly could with what we had?
Okay, so
and that might be a drummer that can barely play.
So going back to the church world, and you spent many years in the church world, and we made the mistake of assuming that Dennis Choi was at the other North Coast, and then realizing, wait, there are two North Coasts. So now we want to know, did you mix for Switchfoot?
I have, yeah, I've mixed for John, for sure. They, like that church, San Diego, speaking of San Diego, like, so much of the music scene in San Diego is like the church, so you would go to like after the 10 o'clock service in the playground, like you would see like John's family and Phil's family and like just so many musicians there. And the thing about that church is that, it is like the Switchfoot church or, whatnot, but like they were just allowed to be in church. Like no one's bothering them, But
well,
yeah,
that's nice.
That is one, I don't know if it was a benefit, but yeah, like his dad, Mark, was the senior pastor there, and he'd be like, you want to hear some new music from John? I'd be like, yes, absolutely.
That must be nice.
So
yeah, it's pretty cool.
One more, earnest question for you. As someone from the outside, because you started in church for those 6 years at Red Rock, and now you've been on the touring life. What's some encouragement you could give church tech leaders now? With church tech leaders now, we're seeing a lot of burnout. We're seeing a lot of them contemplating going on the touring world or going into secular music to, more salaries or less stress or, more salary for the same stress. So what's something as an outsider you'd probably encourage them with? Because, the grass is always greener on the other side, but you're on the other side. So how green is that grass?
Yeah. I think that there are parts of work that you just don't see, like on the touring side. Like you don't see, I still have to build spreadsheets and, secure gear and trucks and do bids and try to get, the right amount of labor and figure out how the vehicles are going to get where they're going and, really bad flights and time away from your family and all that stuff. It's it's just really, it's not what you immediately think it is. I will say that touring it's a very serendipitous thing. You know, like there's no set path, like being a doctor or, you know, like it's just, you just kind of fall into it. And so it seems really fun. But it's pretty tough, you know, like I'm still like pretty actively involved with kind of our church production community. And there are parts of it that I really miss. Now, I will say that the relationship is a little bit more like it's like a cleaner exchange. It's like a transaction, you know, like, I mean, I love the people I work with, but it's very clear, like I am their employee. Like they are my boss. Like they don't have to hire me. You know what I mean? Like they have lots of choices, and like, I'm just fortunate to work with them. In church, it's a lot more challenging because there's this thing of calling that you have to figure out. And there's this idea of like ministry and you're managing things like how your family views the church and their relationship to it. And there's a lot more challenge to it because you just have to balance the things. It's like, it's the reality if you're going to like really do it. And so I guess in terms of encouragement, I would just say, you know, I heard Dennis say it on the podcast, but it was like, it really is it's a calling question. And I think like it would be easy for someone to say, hey, like the church is on fire. Like we've never needed more text than ever before. I mean, those are all true things, but I think what we really need are people that understand their calling. They really need healthy text. You know, they don't need more proficient text. They need healthier text. They need text that like legitimately actually love the church, not look at it as like some kind of springboard or, you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
They really need people that understand the calling of what it means to like serve in the local church. And so I would even say, like, if you don't feel like that, like, please, like, remove yourself, you know, and like do the right thing by the church and don't be in there and then like halfway serve the people that you're around and kind of have like this like grumpy attitude and, you know, have one set of behaviors when you're like passing the stage and when you're mixing and you're posting how great it is. And then, you know, you get in your car and you like talk garbage about leadership and all the ills of the church, which are very real, but like, that's not helpful, you know?
Yeah, it sounds a lot like instead of a pro con on touring or doing the church tech life, it's more, is this my calling or not? Is more of the simple drilled down question. So
yeah, absolutely.
Shifting gears tremendously to something lighter, maybe a lighter roast. Lighter roast. Tell us about these.
Are we going to roast you now, Blake?
Oh boy, I hope so. And then pour me into a cup. So tell us about these tech coffee beans. How are they geared for church techs?
I mean, I just like that crew and brew rhymed. It wasn't really more sophisticated than that. It was just like it was like a bad dad joke, you know? But, you know, I was at home and I was just roasting coffee and I just thought, oh, this would be cool to do one day. And I was out with Phil and I was telling him about it over dinner and he, I don't know what happened, but somehow he thought like I was going to start selling beans right then and there. And it was going to be called True Brew. And I was like, no, like that, my idea was like, you know, when my ears don't work and I'm going to live in my sweatpants perpetually, like that's what I'm going to do. And he posted about it, you know, and just said a bunch of nice things about how True Brew was going to be awesome. And I came home, like we came home from that run of shows and I had a lot of messages like, where is this? And so I just kind of gave myself no outs and I just like, well, I'm going to throw up a landing page and take pre-orders and that'll just force my hand to have to do it. And so, yeah, and that's, that's how it started. When you're bagging like stickers and boxes and like sorting beans, like, and you have like a whole inbox to get to, like, it is not looking like the best idea, but it's really fun,
Well, we might have to buy some of those from you, since we're with the church techs all the time. We got to try this crew brew.
No, I'll send you guys some for the office. Our community is pretty tight knit. It's kind of like everyone knows everyone, and so the support has been really kind. And but yeah, we'll be sure to send you some coffee.
That's awesome. Okay, so before we get to your tech takeaway, I realized we never heard the story of how you illegally shot a coyote with a bow. I need to hear this.
Oh, gosh.
What happened there?
I played it out in my head, so I already have a version.
Yeah. Yeah. I have the 10-pound dog that I like more than my children. Like, it's the key word there. I like my dogs more than my children. And I've got a teenager and a preteen. So
that makes sense.
From the wise people tell me it ebbs and flows and it's going to be okay, but I just got to like hang on for dear life for the next few years. But anyways, I've got a dog and we've got coyotes, and my dog's actually been bit by a coyote. But I've also got all these chickens. And so, these coyotes, they're just looking for a meal. But I realized, oh man, I've got to do something about this, them coming by. And so anyhow, I live in the suburbs, and discharging a firearm is not really within my, something I can do.
Especially not in California.
So well, yeah, not in California, not where I live. So
I was going to say, in Tennessee, you wake up, get your coffee, fire a couple rounds in the air on your front porch, and then you move about your day.
Absolutely.
Not saying that,
this is America.
Not saying that's how it should be, but...
Yeah, that is 100% what Californians think. Like I stayed at a buddy's house in Texas, and he was like, "Hey, let's go shoot." And he just called his neighbors, like, "Hey, just let you know, like me and my buddy are gonna be shooting some targets for fun." Like, and that was it. like here, you would have been carted off. But
well, Church Gear.
Anyway,
the Church Gear crew has shot guns together once before, so.
Yeah,
we do that in Tennessee.
Hey, man. But anyways, that's why I had to get a bow, and that started the spiral of chasing these things and figuring out how to. I feel like if I talk about it further, like I'm gonna like self-incriminate myself. But
did you take the coyote? Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I have. What's the politically correct words? I have dispatched several.
Did you turn it into a dish? Did you eat it that night?
Oh, gross.
No, but I'm not talking about this any further.
Gene Kim is a church tech production guy who tours, but also has chickens and bow hunts in his suburbs. I mean, what a guy with coffee. Okay.
You're doing my best.
Gina, bought you as much time as I could while incriminating you for your tech takeaway.
Thank you.
This is your weird piece of advice of like, hey, this is my specific thing. So what would be your tech takeaway for the church techs out there?
There's one like really like not a lot. I feel like I went maybe too, internal, but here's like a really practical one. The worse the acoustic space is, like, so for example, like, a lot of doing sound is kind of like shaping how people perceive things and kind of like using that to your advantage, and so when I have a room that's really bouncy and reflective, or I have a PA that's kind of just like it's got some holes in it and coverage isn't so great, what I'll do is I will, before the show happens, and I used to do this, I mean, with Phil, like we would just run into a PA, that is just like not okay and just really rough, but, and people are super excited. So, pre-show, I'll put quite a bit of reverb into the playback music. And then I'll also take out a lot of 800 to 1.5K so that that sense of intelligibility is gone. And then I'll make it dark. And so what happens is the sense of clarity gets really messed with, and they're just chatting and everyone's, getting ready for the show. But their ears are just being conditioned to wash, and the discernibility of a vocal where I know a vocal's going to land is kind of dipped. And so now what I've done in this 30, 45 minutes, 1 hour of pre-show is I've kind of acclimated their ears so that when the show actually happens, they're going to feel oh my God, that is so clear. That is so direct. That is so, you know what I mean? And so that's one practical thing you could do, take away, to just kind of buy yourself a little headroom, if that makes sense.
I feel like you just blew my mind. This is the most fascinating tech takeaway because I've never thought of this before. You're conditioning people to, get used to a bad room, and then you just automatically make it better. And they're thinking, wow. And it's kind of
I'm making a bad room worse.
Yeah. It's kind of
leading up to the show.
When people first meet Blake, and I'm he actually does this. Folks, this is true.
This is a true story.
He will turn his personality all the way up to 11 because his personality goes to 11, and he is so wildly obnoxious, and people kind of whoa, I'm going to have to, ease into this guy. And then when, the lights come on, he turns it back down to 9 where he normally lives. So people get used to him.
Yeah, we recently hired a guy, and I turned my personality up to a 10, and we were in a small car with him, and he didn't try to knife me, so that was all I needed to hire him. So there's my managerial style. So Gene, man, we really appreciate you coming on. What you want to plug?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a coffee company. You've got your bow classes you teach. I mean, what do you want to plug?
Girls only like guys with bow skills, so.
Yeah. Kind of one of the things that kind of Dennis was talking about, and another mentor, and was just hey, you're part of our community, but as a touring engineer, maybe you're not as active as maybe what the church production world needs. And he's I just think you should be more involved. And so for the last while, I've been coaching engineers kind of quietly. And so if you're a front of house engineer or tech guy that feels like you could use some kind of mentorship or something like that, that's kind of something it's just been weighing on me. And so I've just been doing that and taking on a few folks a month as I can, depending on the travel schedule. So if you're interested in something like that, reach out. I'd love to talk to you. Otherwise, caffeine, go to Crew Brew, get some coffee.
How heavy do you want us to push your coaching thing? Because we will share with the entire community, but then you might get inundated with hundreds of guys that are yes.
Yeah, I would just say DM me or email me, and go from there.
Sounds great.
But I mean, I'm open to whoever. It's more my capacity is only so much, and kind of the intent. I was at Catalyst one year, and I heard Andy Stanley talk about, you should always be going kind of deep with one person, you should always be mentoring somebody. And so, I was yeah, that's very true. And I haven't done that as much as I would like. And so, the thought was, he said something funny. He's if you're wondering how many people you think you could actively mentor, just keep in mind, Jesus thought 12 was what he could do. And then some of them didn't turn out so great. So do the math for yourself, do the translation. And so I came up with I think I could realistically handle about 3 or 4 people a month. And So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Well, Gene, all you got to do is have them come and bag all your coffee for you as you give your mentorship lessons, so you can get all that free labor in exchange. Like Daniel's son did it.
That's a great idea. My daughter, my youngest, she gets $1 a bag to pack and sticker, and it's so funny. She thinks like she's winning. Like she thinks she's the homeless guy at Wendy's.
I was just about to say, don't take that $1 to Wendy's.
She's crushing it. Yeah, she would be pretty upset if someone took her job. So I don't know if I can do it.
You can double your money at Wendy's. You can guess that card right.
Yeah, you take that. Yeah, you can get $20.
That's me mentoring you, Blake.
There we go. Yeah, I take my paycheck to Wendy's every time. That's why I'm just so fat. I keep eating it. Well, Gene, man, we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, guys. It was fun.
Blake, speaking of you being fat, sorry, but you
No,
just
I
teed me
said
up.
it. I've gained 20 pounds in the past 6 months.
So I was watching a video. Actually, my son pulled up a video on my phone, and it was from our lake day. And I was looking at the video, and I saw myself on the inner tube being pulled by the boat, slapping my belly. And then I thought to myself, oh, man, am I that fat? And then I realized it was you.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'm sorry, buddy, but that's
wow.
100% true. And I feel bad for saying it, but
No, please don't. I actively slap my belly as a method of comedic humor, and because it makes me happy. I like to laugh, and you know what also makes me happy? It makes me real happy, like just extraordinarily happy, is when I see people share the episodes on social and tag us. Someone actually did on our Dennis Choi episode. They said it was a real encouragement, and that'll encourage me, maybe feel better about all this weight gain if you'll repost the episode.
And what if I repost the video of you slapping your belly, and then that will make the community in the tech world feel better, because at least I don't look like that guy.
You should actually. But I have the Bitwarden and password to Instagram, but there we go.
Thanks for listening. And hey, congratulations on surviving Sunday. If you happen to make it through next Sunday as well, join us again for your weekly Tech Breather.